Imagine Europe, a continent united in policy but divided in ambition. Now Spain, a key player in this intricate puzzle, has just made a bold move. But what does it mean? And why is everyone in Europe suddenly so silent? Spain has shifted its stance on China in a way that's left Europe utterly speechless. No one saw this coming. And if you think this is just about cars, think again. It's about power, influence, and the future of Europe's entire relationship with China. Spain's abrupt decision to break away from the European Union's plan to impose heavy tariffs up to 38% on Chinese electric vehicles has left the entire continent in a state of shock. Just a few weeks ago, this move seemed like a no-brainer. European automakers have been struggling to keep up with China's rapidly growing EV industry, with Chinese companies like BYD and NIO flooding the market with cheaper, high-quality alternatives. The tariffs were designed to protect European car manufacturers. But Spain pulled the plug. So why now? Some believe Spain's change of heart stems from its dependence on Chinese trade. According to the latest figures, Spain's trade with China surged by 15% in the last year alone. A full 7% of Spain's total exports are bound for China, including high V-value goods like machinery, electronics, and agricultural products. With numbers like that, it's no wonder Spain is rethinking its stance. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez is playing a long game here, one that involves navigating the fine line between EU solidarity and the harsh realities of economic dependence on Beijing. The meeting between Pedro Sanchez and Xi Jinping earlier this year was more than just a diplomatic handshake. Behind closed doors, trade and economic agreements were the real subjects of discussion. The result, a significant pivot in Spain's foreign policy, one that emphasizes maintaining and even expanding its trade ties with China. Bloomberg recently reported that after the Sanchez-Xi meeting, Spanish exports to China saw a 12% spike in the first quarter of 2024 alone. This spike included everything from agricultural goods to industrial machinery. But here's where it gets interesting. Spain's automotive industry, which directly competes with China's growing EV sector, has yet to feel the full brunt of this competition. By blocking the EU's proposed tariffs, Spain is essentially buying time, allowing its automakers to adjust to the new reality. Political analysts argue that Spain's pivot is a signal that the country sees China as an irreplaceable trading partner. The South China Morning Post ran an article headlined, "Spain's Economic Diplomacy: How Beijing Became the Power Behind Madrid's Bold Moves." It suggests that Spain's economy has become increasingly intertwined with China's, from technology investments to agricultural imports. With its growing dependence, a confrontation with China over EV tariffs could have catastrophic consequences for Spain's broader economy. If you are enjoying our content, please hit the like button to help us even more. Please share and leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow. Thank you. Europe's car industry is fighting for survival. Over the last decade, the European Union watched as its once dominant car manufacturers, from Volkswagen to Peugeot, began to lose market share to cheaper and sometimes superior electric vehicles from China. In 2023, Europe's car exports fell by 9%, while imports of Chinese EVs soared by 18%. According to data from Statista, Chinese EV sales in Europe grew to over 1.22 million units last year, up from just 800,000 a year before. And it's not just quantity. Chinese EVs are winning on quality, too. Automotive News Europe recently published an article showing how Chinese brands have received better customer satisfaction ratings in key European markets than many European competitors. The EU's proposed tariffs were designed to protect European automakers from this onslaught, leveling the playing field by raising the price of Chinese imports. Europe can't afford to lose its manufacturing base. If we let China dominate our car markets, we'll be outsourcing jobs and technological innovation at an alarming rate, said Margarita Vestager, the European Commissioner for Competition, in a recent interview with Leaned. But with Spain refusing to back the tariffs, the EU's strategy can unravel, leaving European automakers exposed to even fiercer competition. Spain's decision to reject the EU's tariff plan is not without risk. In fact, it could backfire in a big way, especially in two key sectors, farming and automotive manufacturing. Spain's agricultural sector is deeply tied to the Chinese market. Over 40% of Spain's pork exports go to China, a trade relationship worth over €5 billion annually, according to data from the Spanish Ministry of Agriculture. Should a trade war erupt, China could easily impose retaliatory tariffs on Spanish agricultural products, devastating an industry that employs over 300,000 people. Then there's the automotive sector. Spain is the second largest car manufacturer in Europe, right behind Germany. But unlike Germany, Spain doesn't have a well-established luxury car segment. Instead, it focuses on mid-market models that are highly susceptible to competition from cheaper Chinese alternatives. A trade conflict with China could result in steep price hikes for components, which would make Spanish cars more expensive to produce and less competitive on the global stage. Reuters highlighted this growing concern in a recent article titled "Spain Risks Economic Fallout as Trade War with China Looms." The piece emphasized that even a slight increase in manufacturing costs could lead to a massive loss of jobs and revenue. Spain's pork industry is one of the largest in Europe, and China is its most lucrative market. Over the past decade, Spanish pork exports to China have grown exponentially, making up a whopping 43% of Spain's total pork export market, according to Euro. This isn't just about money. It's about jobs, too. The pork industry employs tens of thousands of workers, and rural communities across Spain depend on this trade to survive. If China retaliates against Spain's refusal to impose tariffs on Chinese EVs by targeting cultural goods, it could devastate these rural economies. Spain has put itself in a precarious position. One wrong move in China could easily cut its imports of Spanish pork, leaving farmers in a lurch, warned Professor Juan Moreno, an agricultural economist at the University of Seville, in an interview with El Mundo. And it's not just pork. Spain's exports of olive oil, wine, and other agricultural goods could also take a hit if China decides to flex its economic muscles. China is not known for backing down when faced with economic pressure. If the EU imposes tariffs on Chinese EVs, Beijing will likely respond in kind, targeting key European industries. The question is, which sectors will suffer the most? The answer is simple: luxury goods and technology. Europe's high-end brands from LVMH to Hermes depend on China's wealthy consumers. In 2023, Chinese shoppers accounted for nearly 30% of global luxury spending. According to Bain & Company, a Chinese backlash could these companies, forcing them to rethink their entire business models. On the tech front, Europe exports billions of euros worth of equipment to China every year. China is the EU's second largest trading partner, and any disruption to this relationship would have dire consequences. China has the power to shut down entire industries if they feel threatened. The EU's tariffs on EVs could spark a trade war that Europe is ill-prepared to handle, said Elizabeth Bra, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, in a recent op-ed for the Wall Street Journal. Germany's opposition to the tariffs on Chinese EVs is rooted in its automotive industry. Germany is home to giants like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, all of which have significant investments in China. In fact, Volkswagen sold over 3.5 million vehicles in China last year, accounting for nearly 40% of its global sales. Losing access to the Chinese market would be catastrophic for Germany's economy. In contrast, countries like France and Italy are less reliant on China for automotive exports and more focused on protecting their domestic markets. French President Emmanuel Macron has been particularly vocal about the need for tariffs, arguing that Europe must protect its workers from unfair competition. Europe must defend itself. We cannot allow our industries to be destroyed by Chinese subsidies, Macron said in a speech last month covered by Le Figaro. The divide between these countries highlights a growing rift within the EU. Germany, with its strong economic ties to China, is reluctant to escalate tensions, while France and Italy, who have been hit hardest by Chinese competition, are pushing for stronger protections. Spain's decision to go against the EU's tariff proposal reveals the growing fault lines within the European Union. As each country grapples with its own economic challenges, a unified stance on China is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. While some nations like Germany and Spain are prioritizing economic ties with China, others like France and Italy are calling for stronger protections against what they see as unfair competition. This division is more than just a trade issue. It's a political one. Europe is at a crossroads with some countries pushing for deeper integration and others advocating for a more flexible nation-first approach. The Economist recently ran a headline, "The Great European Divide: How China is Driving a Wedge Between EU Members." It's a dilemma that will shape the future of the European Union and its relationship with China for years to come. Let's get into the numbers because the heart of this story is wrapped in trade. In 2023 alone, China's trade surplus with the European Union reached an eye-watering 400 billion euros, a figure that's impossible to ignore. What's driving this imbalance? It's simple. China exports more to Europe than it imports. While Europe buys goods like electronics, machinery, and now electric vehicles, the Chinese market isn't returning the favor in the same proportion. This surplus is becoming a massive headache for European leaders. And it's not just about the numbers. It's about the leverage this gives China in negotiations. The more dependent Europe becomes on Chinese imports, the more power China holds over European economies. Think about it. If Europe continues to rely on cheap Chinese goods, what happens when China decides to tighten the screws? It's a balancing act, one where Europe is constantly on the defensive. Now, Spain's decision to step back from the EU's proposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles shines a spotlight on this issue. Spain, the fourth largest economy in the Eurozone, sees China as too important a partner to risk alienating. The reality is clear. Spain needs Chinese investment, and the surplus doesn't scare them as much as it does France or Italy. Economists like Paul Donovan from UBS have been sounding the alarm, saying China has far more leverage in its relationship with Europe than many people are willing to admit. If Europe doesn't take action now, China's economic footprint will continue to grow at a rate that some fear could put Europe in a chokehold. This story isn't just about Europe and China. What happens in this corner of the world will have ripple effects across the global economy. When two economic giants clash, the fallout isn't contained. It spreads. Right now, the trade tensions between the EU and China are sending shockwaves through global markets. From raw materials in Africa to tech manufacturing in Southeast Asia, the chessboard is shifting. Geopolitically, this escalating tension between Europe and China is also drawing in other global players, especially the U.S. With President Biden's administration pushing for stronger alliances in its own trade war with China, a fragmented European Union could weaken the Western position against Beijing. Now listen to this. While some European countries like Spain are opting for dialogue, the U.S. is taking a more confrontational approach. That divergence could split the Western world strategy towards China. The New York Times recently reported, as Europe and China lock horns, the global supply chain is preparing for massive disruptions. Any escalation could be catastrophic. And it's not just about trade. China is expanding its Belt and Road Initiative, bringing countries across Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia into its orbit. If Europe isolates itself, China might find even more willing partners to fill that economic void. The global economy is shifting quickly, and Spain's decision could change Europe's place in that order. With every diplomatic move, the balance of power shifts a little more toward the east. So what does Spain want here? Is this a purely economic calculation, or is there more at play? Well, let's not forget Spain is positioning itself as a bridge between Europe and the rest of the world. And by refusing to back the EU's tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, it's clear that Spain sees itself playing a key role in navigating these troubled waters. Here's why. Spain has significant economic interest in maintaining a solid relationship with China. China is now Spain's third largest trading partner, and as of 2023, Spanish exports to China grew by over 15% with machinery, agriculture, and pharmaceuticals leading the charge. But it's not just about trade, it's about investment. In the past year, Chinese companies have invested heavily in Spain, particularly in technology, infrastructure, and renewable energy sectors. In fact, the Financial Times reported that Chinese direct investment in Spain exceeded Euro 5 billion in 2023 alone. That's massive, and Spain knows that this capital is vital for its long-term economic development. Sanchez's government has also been vocal about its desire to mediate between the EU and China. By taking a softer approach, Spain hopes to become a key player in shaping the EU's future policies. It's a strategic move, one that positions Spain not as a follower of European directives, but as a leader advocating for pragmatic, dialogue-driven solutions. Spain doesn't want to simply follow in the footsteps of France or Germany. It wants to carve out its own role, balancing the European need for competition with the economic necessity of strong ties with China. It's a difficult role to play, but one that could define Spain's position within the European Union for years to come. How could Spain's decision to push for dialogue instead of conflict position the country as a key player in shaping future EU-China relations? Spain's refusal to back the proposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles isn't just making headlines. It's setting the stage for an upcoming vote that could determine Europe's entire trade future. The EU is preparing to vote on these tariffs, and Spain's shift may have thrown a wrench into what was supposed to be a straightforward decision. The EU needs a strong consensus to push through significant trade measures like these tariffs. But now, with Spain backing out, the fault lines within the Union are exposed. Germany, already hesitant about the tariffs, could follow Spain's lead, and if the vote falls apart, it will send a message to Beijing that Europe isn't as united as it claims to be when it comes to China. According to Politico Europe, Spain's decision has thrown the EU's carefully laid plans into chaos, with key leaders scrambling to find a way to salvage the upcoming vote. And that vote is critical. If the EU fails to impose tariffs, it could weaken Europe's negotiating position with China. If the tariffs go through, Spain and other dissenting nations will have to face the consequences of potential economic retaliation from Beijing. So what does this all mean? Spain's move isn't just another headline. It's a seismic shift in the balance of power between Europe and China. As trade tensions heat up, Spain has taken a calculated gamble, one that could reshape its economy and Europe's future. Will Spain's decision spark new alliances or deepen the cracks in the European Union? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, the world is watching. We hope you are enjoying this video. We're thrilled to have you with us today. If our content struck a chord or sparked some inspiration, go ahead and smash that like button and hit subscribe to join our awesome community. Please share this video to help us grow. Your support is super valuable. Check out another video from our channel, which is now on the